Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this seminar on alcohol awareness. My name is Dr. Melissa Perrin. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Illinois, and believe it or not, I have about 30 years of experience in the field, and one of my primary expertises is addictions, use, abuse, and dependence. I'm also the psychological consultant for the Episcopal Diocese of Chicago and have been following very carefully what the General Convention has asked us to do in terms of alcohol awareness. And one of the things that we're going to do today, the primary thing we're going to do today, is talk about alcohol and alcohol use in our buildings, in our festivals, in our way of being with each other in community. A concern that we have is what to do when someone that we know and love and are in community with drinks or drugs too much. And the definition of too much is something we're going to talk about in a little bit. But today, what we're really talking about is how to love each other in community, how not to judge, how to attend to someone when they're in pain, how to attend to someone when their actions and behaviors let us know that they're struggling, but they may not know. One of my primary goals is I do not want to teach you how to be Big Brother. I do not want to teach you how to get into someone's life inappropriately. I do want to teach you how to have fierce conversations with each other. How to say to someone, I love you, and I'm worried about you. Or if you don't love them, I am sharing space or community with you, and I'm deeply concerned about what I'm seeing. We have the ability to take care of each other, whether we like each other or not. And the hardest thing for us is to cross over a threshold and say, I have something that I'm afraid to talk to you about, because you're going to push back, or you're going to feel that I'm intervening too closely. You're going to feel that I'm taking your inventory. You're going to feel that I'm trying to shut something down. Or there is no problem and I'm overreacting. Those are usually the conversations we have, and those are the ones that we don't want to have. So the bottom line is, each one of us has a definition of what healthy living is. Each one of us has a set of criteria for ourselves in which we decide what's quality of life and what is the quality of life that we want to live. And each one of us has a definition for ourselves of who we don't want to be. And so one of the harder things about this conversation is, does my definition of quality of life, does my definition of health and recovery trump yours? Does it supersede your definition of what your quality of life is? And the answer is no, it doesn't. However, the next part of that is, if your quality of life and the levels that you are willing to go to impinge on mine, or make things dangerous for me or people that I love, or make it difficult to work with you, I have to have the conversation. So as we go throughout the day, I will be talking about conversation. And by that, I mean that as human beings, the only way really that we have to connect with each other is verbally. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I find the language itself of any nationality, our language is so clunky, and it doesn't get us very far. And because we don't always have language to say, this is the detail of what I'm trying to share, this is the nuance that I'm trying to give you, often we end up with cliches, right? You keep your side of the street clean so that I don't have to walk on your glass. Well, then what are you doing on my side of the street? Get over on your side of the street and keep your side of the street clean. We end up with those kinds of cliches trying to communicate to each other. Fierce conversations, talking with each other, it's messy. It's really, really messy. And I'm going to give you permission to be messy. I'm going to give you permission to risk and put forward that thing you're concerned about. And we'll talk about how to do that. And risk hearing the response. So in any conversation, whether it's, hello, how are you? Or I'm concerned about how you're drinking when we have an engagement in the church at night. I'm really worried. It looks like you come stoned, or it looks like you come already inebriated, and I don't want to serve you any more champagne, but I don't know how to have that conversation with you. Whether it's that one or that one, I risk, and you risk answering me, and you risk answering me. So risk is important. The other thing that I want to start the day with is a definition of love. Unconditional love says that I see you, fully and thoroughly. And I hold you to your own standards, not mine. I see you fully and I accept you. Acceptance is an action step. It's a 24/7, 365 action that we have to take when we love each other. I see you and I understand, to the best of my very human, finite ability, who you are and what matters to you. And I'm not going to ask you to change. However, my side of that relationship is I love me too. And I may have to change. If unconditional love says you are who you are, and I can ask you to be different, but you're going to be who you are, that puts the onus on me to adapt. And sometimes adapting means I walk away. Sometimes adapting means I understand that every once in a while there's going to be a flare in this thing that I don't want you to do, and you're going to do it. And sometimes my action is, I just love you, and I'm going to live beside you. So unfortunately, in our culture, sometimes we view love as something in which you're supposed to do what I tell you to do, and I'm supposed to do what you tell me to do. And that's not how it works. Love is, I see you, I know you, I accept you. And acceptance means not that you've come according to my script, but that I understand that you're living your life the way you understand your life needs to be lived, or to the level that you can live your life. That's love. So when I talk about us living in community with each other and loving each other and having this conversation about, hey, I'm worried about you, or I'm worried about the safety of our building, or I'm worried about what happens at the end of an evening for you, or I'm scared to let you drive, or I don't know how you get to church, or those conversations in which we're really frightened for ourselves and the other person's safety and well-being. I think it's an act of love to say, I'm worried. And even when you do this, the next thing that happens is harm, on whatever gradation that is. And so I need us to have this conversation so that I'm safe, you're safe, everyone is safe. The danger with the language that I just used is we get into Big Brother territory. I do not affirm Big Brother territory. I do not affirm parenting each other. I do affirm loving each other and holding each other accountable. So that's the last piece I'm going to talk about is accountability. Integrity and accountability are really important, and they go well together. They go very, very well together. And accountability is the ability to say to oneself, this is what I know about myself. I accept this about myself. Whatever that is. So I will tell you that I have not had an Oreo cookie for 29 and a half years. And the reason that I have not had an Oreo cookie for 29 and a half years is I cannot have just one Oreo cookie. I am going to finish all 3 rows of those Oreo cookies, and then I'm going to go get me some more. So I am middle-aged, and my body is doing all sorts of things, and my metabolism is stopped despite my best efforts, which means I am never going to have an Oreo cookie ever again in my life because I want my body to be a certain way. I like me better when I'm not eating Oreo cookies. I like me so much better when I'm not eating Oreo cookies. And so what I've just done for you is I've just said to you, this is who I am. Love me. I'm always going to have sweet and low. Always. And if you take it personally, that I'm not going to eat the dessert that you brought or the scones that are in the back of the church, I'm going to love you and let you take that personally. Because I know that I can't have scones or Oreo cookies or Frango mints. There are all sorts of candies that have come on the market that I've never had, but I'm told are fabulous. But what I know is, in order for me to be who I want to be with you, I must not have them. And so that's me being accountable. Now there are other things. For example, my name is Melissa and I'm in a relationship with coffee. And I almost put that on my Facebook feed. I'm in a relationship with coffee. But I thought that if I do that, then you all would know that I'm like really in a relationship with coffee. Like it's not like a funny thing. It's not like me being cute. I'm like, I want my coffee. I could drink it 24/7. I could drink it and sleep all night. It's not something I'm willing to work on. It's not. My body's changing. My metabolism has stopped. I've been told that coffee is going to keep my metabolism weird. I've been told that coffee will give me hot flashes, and I like a dollop of cream in my coffee. I'm worried about my weight, I'm worried about my middle, and I'm worried about my metabolism. I'm not willing to give up my cream. What does that tell you about me? That tells you that I've attended to my quality of life, and I've decided that my relationship with coffee is not something I'm willing to change. I can also tell you that down the road, I can guarantee you I'm going to have to give up coffee. But like most human beings on the planet, and especially most Americans, I'm going to have my relationship with my coffee for as long as I can, until the consequences are hard enough that I'm not allowed to have my relationship with coffee, and then I'm going to have to break up with coffee. And then I'll do what I did when I quit smoking cigarettes 30 years ago, and I will walk over to people who have coffee and I will just smell it. And I will miss it. So when we talk about alcohol and drugs, and we talk about the relationship people have, and we talk about getting in their space, and getting between them and the thing that they love, I just related two things, and I did it in a way that made you giggle and laugh. I assume, and I don't do that very often, I assume that's because you can relate. I assume that's because there's one or two things in your life you feel the same way. I've also made a point of making it light so that I can teach you with a very safe topic, because the truth is, coffee doesn't change my mood. Coffee doesn't change the way I'm able to show up in the world, really. I have to pee more often than other people. Oh my God, I said that on tape. But when we're talking about substances, when we're talking about alcohol, pot, OxyContin, heroin, cocaine, methamphetamines, name it, whatever thing is out there that people have a relationship with, those things change mood. Those things change perspective. They change motivation. They impact us, those of us outside of the individual who's using, in a pretty significant way also. We can't trust them. Even though they will experience themselves as trustworthy and fine, we can't trust them because we've learned that when they are under the influence of whatever their substance of choice is, they can't make good decisions. They can't make good decisions. So that doesn't happen to me with coffee, and I trust that if it does, one of you will come forward and say at the break, you know, we're having some coffee and we're having trouble understanding you. With alcohol, and then name your drug of choice, we have a significant shift in reality orientation. We have a significant shift in perspective. So, why are we talking about this today, other than the fact that it's a crucial topic? We are talking about it because General Convention, 4 years ago, made some resolutions and primarily said, we need to talk about this. We need to have a conversation. I did give you some of the resolutions that people came up with, and we're going to talk about those at length for about 20 minutes. What made those resolutions so important is Bishop Heather Cook and Reverend Diane Reiners in New York. Bishop Heather Cook was under the influence of alcohol, and she was texting as she drove her car, and she ran into a man on a bicycle and left him dead at the scene. Did not understand that she had left a dead person behind her, understood that she'd hit him, went home. That was the first thing she thought to do. When she understood that something bad, very bad, had happened, she got back in her car and went back out to the scene where there were people on the scene. He was gone. And it was very clear that it happened because she was inebriated. She was under the influence of alcohol. She was given a 7-year sentence in prison and had a former DUI. What really shocked everyone was that in 2010, she had a driving under the influence ticket and got into recovery, a level of recovery, and whatever that definition was for her. She was made bishop between 2010 and when she was on the road, texting and under the influence. And the larger world thought that because she was a bishop, she should have known better. I will tell you that because she had trouble with alcohol in the past, she should have known better. It has nothing to do with collar. It has nothing to do with place. It has nothing to do with authority. It has everything to do with what's my relationship with this thing. And then Reverend Diane Reiner in New York was picked up for a DUI, driving erratically, stopped her car at one point in traffic in the New York tunnel, and was picked up when she came out of the tunnel and was under the influence. And it had happened a week or two after Heather Cook's experience, and so it was high on everyone's radar. So the questions at General Convention were, how are we having this conversation? What's going on? And so you'll see in your handouts and here, oops, I should advance this, that we have some policies on substance abuse, addiction and recovery, a policy on the role of the church in the culture of alcohol and other drug abuse, and then questioning ordinands about addiction. And we're going to talk about these at length for, again, the next 20 minutes or so. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. What are some jokes about Episcopalians? Are we known as Whiskeypalians? Yes, we are. And I'm sure you've heard the one that says, when you have 4 Episcopalians in a room, you're going to find a 5th, right? A 5th of whiskey, a 5th of vodka. Sherry is the one I always hear about, is Episcopalians and sherry, the relationship we have with our sherry. I'm just going to let you know that when a group has a nickname, it's an issue. I'm not going to say that other denominations don't have a relationship with alcohol that's questionable, but we have a name. And we have jokes about us. And so there's something about our culture, there's something about the way we live with each other, that alcohol is a significant part of it. So here we go. The Task Force A-158 to review and revise policy on substance abuse, addiction, and recovery. Resolved, the House of Bishops acknowledge the Episcopal Church's long-standing tolerance for the use of alcohol, which in some cases has contributed to its misuse and it undermined a climate of wholeness and holiness for all. That our church too often avoids hard conversation about alcohol use and the role of forgiveness and compassion in healing and recovery. And that the Episcopal Church now commits to create a new normal in our relationship with alcohol. A new normal in our relationship with alcohol, which is going to happen, by the way, one person at a time. Truly, one person at a time. And in essence, what they've put forward to us is each one of us has to assess our relationship with alcohol or a mood-altering substance that fits in our lives. Or in my case, coffee. What's my relationship with coffee? We aspire to be a place in which conversations about alcohol, substance misuse, or addiction are not simply about treatment, but about renewal, justice, wholeness, and healing. What they're addressing there is that for a lot of people, not using alcohol is the answer. And what we're left with is what the alcohol covers, what the alcohol buys for the individual socially. There's a whole bunch of living that happens without using, and we will talk about that in the second hour. So I love it that they've rounded this out to not just can we have the conversation, not just can we help people stop using, but we've also got to continue to have a relationship with that individual and attend to it. Recovery is a rich and deep thing. So there's abstaining, which is what most people think about. Abstaining is when the individual does not use their substance of choice. And then recovery is, how do I live my life? Well, with accountability, with fellowship and companionship, with camaraderie, and how do I show up at work? That's recovery. How do I do that without anesthesia? Without anesthesia. And that's what they've asked us to attend to. We affirm that Recovery Ministries of the Episcopal Church has long been and continues to be a valuable resource for this work, and further. And now we're going to go into 13 different things that we need to do. I won't read them all verbatim, but here we go. The church must provide a safe and welcoming environment for all people, including people in recovery. 2 ways to hear this. One is we keep all God's children safe, right? And we also want to make sure that we are all able to get along with each other and feel like we're welcome. But the other piece is when we have someone who is struggling with alcohol use, what do you do with the goblet? What do you do with the Eucharist? What do you do? Do you sip? Do you take a blessing? Do you dip? What do you do? Do you have a chalice that has wine that's been blessed? and a chalice that has grape juice that's been blessed? If we have gluten-free wafers for everyone in the parish, whether they're gluten-free or not, should we have juice that's been blessed for everyone in the parish as a choice? How do we make our way of living in these buildings and with each other workable for everyone? All applicable federal and state laws should be obeyed, including those governing the serving of alcohol beverages to minors. Seems like a gimme, wouldn't you agree? That one seems pretty obvious. That one seems pretty obvious. And so what is the relationship that teenagers have with alcohol? And especially in this area where we're talking today, we have binge drinking every weekend. We have daytime parties where the kids will gather together, especially on days off, and they will be drinking during the day because they know not to drink at night when mom and dad are around. We have kids who are already deeply involved in a relationship with alcohol in the North Shore, and I'm sure in other towns and other areas. The question is, how do we show up for that? How do we adults in the church show up for that, and what is the relationship with alcohol in our church? And that means, how do we enjoy time with each other? What do we do with teenagers? What do we model for them? We don't model binge drinking, most of us. That is the style of drinking that teenagers use. But we do model a relationship with alcohol, and whether it's necessary for everything that we do. Is there always alcohol at every church function? What does that say? And I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. I'm saying it's something to explore. What does it mean that at every church function we have alcohol in some way, shape, or form? What does that say? What are our values? Some dioceses and congregations may decide not to serve alcohol at events or gatherings. Quick show of hands. If you don't serve alcohol at your gatherings, will people come? Right? So if hands didn't go up, does that mean this is something that you actually worry about? Nodding heads would work, or shaking heads? Yeah. If we don't serve alcohol, people won't come. If we don't serve alcohol, the big donors won't come. We don't mind if this person doesn't come because every time he comes, he's disruptive. But if we don't serve alcohol, what happens over here? What happens to the way we live? How do we attend to the nonverbal and verbal specialness that people ask for? If I don't serve alcohol, who will come? And then we can also have it BYOB, bring your own beverage. And then we don't have to worry about whether or not we're serving it. But if someone needs to have it, they can bring it. What does that mean? If we step away from that, if we have the conversation about it, is one thing. If we don't have the conversation, but we just say BYOB, knowing that someone is going to bring their Starbucks coffee mug filled with, right? Whatever it is that it's filled with. And we turn a blind eye. What does that mean? When alcohol is served, it must be monitored, and those showing signs of intoxication must not be served. Whenever alcohol is served, the rector, vicar, or priest in charge must appoint an adult to oversee its serving. The adult must not drink beverages during the time of his or her execution of his or her responsibilities. If hard liquor is served, a certified server is required. I'm not even going to ask for a show of hands to see if everyone follows that one, because most people don't know that that exists. Most people don't know that the General Convention resolved that there's a way to have a relationship with alcohol. That there's a way to have a relationship with alcohol in terms of who serves it, how it's served, and where the responsibility lies. Serving alcoholic beverages at congressional events where minors are present is strongly discouraged. If they are present, alcohol must be served at a separate station that is monitored at all times to prevent underage drinking. Okay, this one, I don't know about the rest of you, but cups left behind are easily found and easily used. But I like the intention here. I like the intention of we're going to be mindful. We're going to attend to where the alcohol is, who's drinking it. We're going to attend to it. Now, most folks get involved in whatever the event is, and they forget to think about that. And one of the reasons that it's been suggested that one person be assigned to monitor this, that person can be Ebenezer Scrooge. When I announced that we were going to be doing this, I said, I'm not a party pooper. I believe in fun, and I believe in community, and I believe in drinking. I also believe that it can be done in a safe way. We've got to have the conversation. Alcoholic and non-alcoholic beverages must be labeled clearly as such. Food prepared with alcohol does not need to be labeled, provided the alcohol is completely evaporated by the cooking process. We do not send people into other people's kitchens and assess. You see, this could become so nitpicky. This could become so controlling, and we do not want that. I encourage you to read these resolutions with an idea toward, here are some good practices, identifying people to serve, identifying people to monitor, having a separate station, attending to where the kids are. All of that is very, very powerful. And there comes a moment in which an individual who's going to struggle with alcohol might look at a dish and say, beef bourguignon might have some alcohol in it. I should probably not have beef bourguignon at this particular event. Perhaps I can make it in my kitchen without alcohol. But right now, this is not a good idea for me. And there, I absolutely believe in the individual's ability to make their own choice. We should not be monitoring what goes into someone else's mouth, and we cannot monitor how alcohol evaporates in the cooking process. But the ability to have the conversation, I'm back to the conversation, these resolutions make it possible for us to be at a vestry meeting and say, here we go. How are we doing? How are we going to apply these? What does that mean for us in our congregation? In the way we set up our parties, how is this going to work? Okay. Whenever alcohol is served, appealing non-alcoholic alternatives must be offered with equal prominence and accessibilities. Juice in the chalice, cider, a bubbly cider, I can't remember what it's called. But there are alternatives. There are alternatives. And there are those who will say to you, I cannot have alcohol, please don't serve it. It isn't fair to me if you serve it and I'm not able to have it. And that is a very different conversation to have with that individual of how can we help you feel safe, and there's a larger group of people here who are able to have alcohol safely and effectively. They can make good choices with it. They can have one or a half a wine, whatever it is. We don't have to have an all or nothing way of being. And if an individual wants an all or nothing way of being, that's a conversation to have. The serving of alcoholic beverages at church events should not be publicized as an attraction of the event. Because what are we selling? Forgive me for putting it in a consumerism thought process here, but what are we selling? Are we selling camaraderie, community, alcohol, gambling? What are we selling? What are we doing? Food must be served when alcohol is present. The groups or organizations sponsoring the activity at each event which alcohol beverages are served must have permission from the clergy or vestry. And there is a particular, and even if it's rote, we are going to serve this. Is that okay? Or may I have your permission? Yes, you can. Done. We just want something where a box is checked, where the conversation has been had. Again, every opportunity for mindfulness is important. Clergy shall consecrate an appropriate amount of wine when celebrating the Eucharist and perform ablutions in a way that does not foster or model misuse. This is a larger issue than most people know, in which too much wine is consecrated, and then someone's got to finish it off. Whether you finish it at the altar or you go to the sacristy and finish it there. And I know that in some sacristies there's a specific place where one pours it into the ground so that it goes into the world in a different way. But a lot of clergy will consecrate too much, and then they will drink all of it at the altar, because you have to, right? You have to. It's consecrated. You can't pour it down the sink. And so we need to attend to that. How much? If we have the certain number of wafers, right, according to how many people are in the pews, it's important to use that same level of thought with wine. And again, for some, when they're watching this video or when they're in the audience even, some of the things that I may be saying may have people attending to themselves, oh, I do that. Oh, I do that. But then if I don't drink too much wine at the altar, and then I have to go out into coffee hour and I have to face people, and I feel anxious socially. I feel anxious about actually attending to someone, or there are 2 or 3 members of my congregation who make me feel so small or so anxious or whatever it is. I need to have that level of anesthesia. And it's a safe way to get it. if I use consecrated wine. So for those of you watching the video who might be feeling that way or thinking that way, attend to the level of anxiety that you feel. Attend to how you are addressing coffee hour 20 minutes before it happens. How you are addressing those one-to-one conversations or exchanges that you are going to hopefully avoid, but if you have to have it, you've got a nice sense of anesthesia. We're going to have to talk about another way to manage that than drinking too much consecrated wine at the altar. We encourage clergy to acknowledge the efficacy of receiving the sacrament in one kind and consider providing non-alcoholic wine, grape juice. If we have gluten-free wafers for people, we really should have non-alcoholic wine blessed for people. And be it further resolved that mindful of the emerging legalization of other addictive substances and the increasing rise of addiction, that the Executive Council of the Episcopal Church provide for ready availability, implementation, and continuing development of this policy church-wide. And here, of course, they're referencing marijuana use, edibles, all of the myriad of ways that the marijuana is becoming available to people. We'll talk about that a little bit as we get into the day. It is a topic for another day. But they're addressing the fact that part of being in community with each other is going to include the many ways that people can be inebriated, the many ways that people can be have their mood altered and their perception shifted. And part of, again, loving each other is, I see this happening. This is the impact it has on me. We should talk. Okay? The next resolution, 159, only has 4 points. The role of the Church in the culture of alcohol and other drug abuse. Resolved, the House of Bishops recognize the field of substance use disorders and addiction has advanced substantially since 1985, and the 68th General Convention passed the current policy, acknowledging that alcohol use, addiction, and recovery all involve, this made me so happy, biological, psychological, social, and spiritual dimensions. Yes, it does. I'm thrilled that this is in resolution form because it gives us so many more ways to talk about it, and it deepens the conversation we're going to have, and it deepens the experience that we can have with other human beings. Resolved that as holy baptism is the entrance to the life of wholeness and holiness, and addiction disrupts relationships with God, others, and ourselves, impairing body, mind, and spirit, the Church, respecting the dignity of every human being. I'm not supposed to be your mother or your nanny. Has a moral and ethical responsibility to confront and repent the Episcopal Church's complicity in a culture of alcohol, denial, and enabling. 2, speak to cultural norms that promote addiction. 3, promote spiritual practices as a means of prevention and healing. 4, advocate for public funding and health insurance coverage for prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery, and collaborate with qualified community resources offering services. Further resolved that the Episcopal Church affirms the need for exercising a healing ministry. A lot of churches do this, by the way, by having 12-step meetings in their basements or in their rooms. A lot of churches try to make their building a home for people to meet and have fellowship, heal, and have a spiritual relationship with something larger than themselves. The language of the 12-step rooms is a higher power. And to attend to all whose lives are affected by addiction and encourages all members of the Episcopal Church to pursue healing in their personal, professional, relational, and vocational lives. Seek help at the first sign of the disease of addiction, and be it further resolved. We're going to pause there for just a minute. How many of you can raise your hands if you want to, how many of you take the advice that is offered to you whether you asked for it or not? He does. I don't. I have had to train myself to say, I will mull that. Thank you very much. I have trained myself to say, oh, I have thought about that, but I will think about that a little bit further. I have trained myself to try to be teachable. What I know about every single one of us in this room and everyone who's watching the video is we all have life experience. We all have figured a number of things out. And I take it on faith that you guys know things that I don't know. And I take it further on faith that you figured out how to live your lives in such a way that it works for you most of the time. So if you offer me advice, whether I ask for it or not, I try to hear it with the ear of, you have something to teach me, even if it annoys me, or I think it's stupid, or I don't want to have anything to do with what you've just suggested I do. Give up coffee? Really? Why would I do that? Even though my doctor has explained, right? Other people say, oh, I don't drink coffee anymore. It keeps me up at night. Or women my age say, I have more hot flashes when I drink coffee. I'm like, I'm totally willing to have a hot flash. But I'm logging all of it. I am logging all of it so that when it's time, when I realize, oh, geez, I'm really going to have to do something about this. My quality of life has gone down to a place where I don't want it to go any lower than it is. And you'll note that I've just indicated that we all have a degree that we're willing to slide. I don't get to decide what that is for you. You don't get to decide what that is for me, unless I'm not doing my job. You can't live with me that way anymore. I'm endangering other people. I've lost credibility because I'm doing something too much or too little. Those are the times that we get to step into someone else's life and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Or we can say, I've already stepped into your life 15 times, and I know that a lay definition of crazy is I do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting different results. Time for me to step back. Time for me to step back. So when this resolution says we need to attend, when the first sign of addiction comes, Dr. Perrin, with 30 years of experience in this field, can guarantee you that the first sign of addiction is not the one people pay attention to. They say, it was the one time, I'll do it differently next month, I'll cut back, other people are overreacting. There is no attending the first time. The 5th, the 10th, the 75th time? Maybe. Maybe. And I appreciate the resolution. I appreciate the request that we be mindful of our relationship with something. And then resolved, the Episcopal Church directs dioceses to work in partnership with the Church Medical Trust Fund. And the purpose of this one is to address prevention, intervention, diversion, etc. We're doing that today. Watching the film does that today. We're trying very hard to attend to how do we get the education out there, how do we work with people. If I say 1 or even 5 things that make people stop and think when they walk away from watching this, being part of this, and something changes, or they see something in a month and they say, I want to do something differently about that this time. Or as we go into Advent and the Christmas season and mulled wine and eggnog and all of those things, how are we going to shift our relationship with that in our community over the next 8 weeks? Now, the other resolution that I put in your packet here is question ordinands about addiction. This is a direct response to Bishop Heather Cook having a history of alcohol issues and using other substances and still being ordained or moved into being a bishop. And the question is, where should we have seen this? What happens? Or if we have someone who's ordained into the diaconate or priesthood and they come with a long relationship with alcohol or drugs that's troublesome, and folks look at us, after some event has happened and they say, how did you not know this? Or what makes it okay for this person to have a collar and be a leader in our community when you knew that there was something that made them make bad decisions? So that's what this resolution is about. Resolved, the House of Bishops concurring that sponsoring clergy, vestries, commission on ministries, standing committees, and bishops interviewing and evaluating nominees, postulants, and candidates for the ordination explore directly issues regarding substance use in their lives and family systems. I'm coming back to that in just a minute. Be it further resolved that nominees, postulants, and candidates who may have addiction issues be offered appropriate resources and referred to qualified mental health, healthcare, or addiction professionals for further evaluation prior to proceeding in the ordination process. Okay. This is the one that makes everybody anxious. This is the one, because this one talks about how much do you need to know about me. Further, it talks about my family of origin. If I had been in the resolution committee, and I will tell you that nobody asked my opinion, but they should have. They should have. I would also say that those of us discerning with someone also be aware of addiction that we have and addiction in our families of origin. All of us. So I'm going to say that a rule of thumb in my field, and you know that we interpret the heck out of everything. A rule of thumb in my field is take it at face value first. Always, always, always hear a statement at face value. Always. Face value. Interpret nothing. Take it at face value. Explore it. The next time that statement comes, listen for what's underneath. A hypothesis about what that might mean. The third interpretation, because the first one is face value, the second one is what might it mean, the third one is what's the opposite of that? What's another engine that could be running this? That's the third one. The fourth hypothesis is what's one that I wouldn't think about? What's one that doesn't fit obvious and obvious? What's the fourth one? And then the fifth one is I don't know. Clueless, clueless, clueless. My job as a psychologist is to understand your history, your background, how you think, what you do, what your tendencies are, and I make inferences from that. But my side of the couch is, what do I need to know about me? What am I vulnerable to? What are the interpretations I tend to skew toward? What are the filters I look through the world with? What are the things that make me vulnerable to over-interpreting you? And so one of the things that I teach my students all the time is interpretation says more about the person interpreting than what's being interpreted. I'll say that again. Interpretation says more about the person interpreting than about what's being interpreted. Unless you're a doctor and you've been trained not to do that. But even I, as a human being, have to be very careful that, am I interpreting this through a filter from my background? Can I keep my humanity right in front of me to know that I don't know the answers? Can I keep my humanity? Can I keep my fears? Can I keep my vulnerabilities? Can I keep my need to save and help people in check enough that I can hear what you're saying? The same thing is true with discernment. If I am looking through a filter, a glass that is smudged with my needs, my fears, my hopes, my desires, I can't discern for you. I can't discern with you. I'm discerning my needs, my hopes, my fears, and my desires. So we who listen with, who attend to, who discern with other people, have to do every piece of work we can do to keep our own inner filter clear. Or to say, I have to excuse myself from this particular part of the conversation because I don't have any insight. Or I have to excuse myself from working with this person because too close to home. So it's not just that the ordinand or the nominee or the postulant or the candidate needs to be assessed, but also we, those of us who listen and hold them in care and discernment. Those of us in leadership positions have to be aware, where are my weaknesses? Now, the discussion about family of origin, if there's addiction in the family of origin, the rabbit trail here that's being followed is physiologically, there's a genetic predisposition for children of alcoholics and addicts to have a gene that means that they can't process alcohol or drugs in a certain way. So as I say to my clients, if you have both parents who are both alcoholics and you drink alcohol alcoholically, from the first drink, it's because you had the gene, it was on, it was turned on, that gene. And all of this is analogous, of course. We have other people who drink and they don't have any problem with it. They go for years drinking normally, whatever that definition is. And then one day, the switch flips on. And then that day forward, they cannot not drink compulsively. They cannot not use compulsively. When the gene is switched on, it is on, it cannot turn off. It cannot turn off, it cannot turn off. We can change the way we think about it. We can change the relationship we have with it. We can set up all sorts of boundaries and barriers and ways of having a relationship with it, but the gene is on. The alcoholic style of drinking is on. So the hypothesis is, if we are working with someone in the church who wants to move into a leadership position or holds a leadership position, and they come from a family of origin that has alcohol or drug addiction, compulsion, the ism, right? Same candy, different wrapper, ism. Then we are working with someone who people can believe, sometimes falsely, that this individual is also going to have a relationship that's problematic with alcohol or drugs. The intention is good in this resolution. However, because someone comes from a family that has addiction and ism problems, does not mean that they're going to have addiction and ism. Again, ism, alcoholism. And so I encourage you to take this with a mindfulness grain of salt, listening carefully. And the question is, what is your relationship with alcohol? You know, if I were discerning something and someone said to me, what is your relationship with Oreos? I'm going to say, we totally divorced 29 and a half years ago. I think about it daily. I don't know if he's got a new wife. I don't know if he's had a new life. Someone was able to change, but I have never been able to have a relationship with Oreos without completely losing my integrity. That's my relationship with Oreos. So here's the thing, is we can have a relationship with someone or something, it never goes away. It never goes away. We can break up with someone, we can break up with something, and because we've had an intimate, passionate, loving, life-changing life with it, it's always going to be in our psyche, in our soul, in our sometimes daily living. So coming back to the question, what's your relationship with it? That's going to tell us a lot. We're going to break for questions in about a minute, because this first part of the morning we've gone through all the resolutions, dry as they are. We're setting the foundation for what happens in the next hour. In the next hour, we're going to talk about how to have the conversation, when our antennas should perk up, what things we might need to think about for ourselves and for the other individual when we have that conversation. But now we're going to stop and we're going to answer some questions. Is that okay?